Celestia Prime hung above the emerald world of Valeris like a second moon made of silver fire. From space, the station resembled a shining ring wrapped around a glowing crystal core, its countless lights visible from the planet below. Millions of travelers, merchants, diplomats, and Chinese and tourists filled its enormous districts every day. Some came to negotiate trade agreements between star systems. Others came simply to stare through the transparent observation domes and admire entire constellations drifting across the darkness. Daniel Cross was not one of those people. At that moment, he was staring at a maintenance drone that appeared to be trying to arrest a vending machine. He folded his arms and watched the scene unfold. "Explain yourself," he said. The drone emitted a series of electronic beeps. The vending machine responded by dispensing a sandwich. Daniel sighed. "Honestly, that might be the strongest defense argument I've heard all month." The drone flashed a red warning light. Unauthorized nutritional activity detected. The vending machine dispensed another sandwich. "Case dismissed," Daniel declared. Nearby technicians laughed as the drone finally gave up and floated away. Life aboard Celestia Prime was never boring. Daniel continued his patrol through Sector 7, passing streams of visitors arriving for the annual Unity Festival. Massive holographic banners floated between towers, displaying symbols from hundreds of allied worlds. Alien languages shimmered across the displays. Music echoed through the corridors. The festival only happened once every 5 years. This year was particularly important because Queen Elyra herself was attending. Daniel stepped onto a moving platform that carried him through one of the station's central promenades. Above him, transparent ceilings revealed stars glittering against the endless black ocean of space. Even after 10 years aboard the station, the view never became ordinary. His wrist communicator buzzed. "Officer Cross," a familiar voice answered. "Report." Daniel immediately recognized Commander Voss. "Everything is normal, sir." "Define normal." A drone tried to arrest a vending machine. Several seconds of silence followed. "Cross!" "Yes, sir?" "I regret asking." The channel closed. Daniel grinned. Some things never changed. As the transport platform curved around a massive observation tower, activity suddenly increased. Security personnel moved into position. Festival visitors stepped aside respectfully. A royal convoy was approaching. Elegant anti-gravity vehicles glided through the promenade surrounded by Imperial guards. Daniel straightened automatically. The central vehicle slowed. For a brief moment, he caught sight of Queen Elyra through the transparent canopy. She looked remarkably human, except for the long, graceful ears extending through her silver hair. She wore a dark ceremonial uniform instead of elaborate royal robes, giving her an appearance that was both regal and practical. Beside her sat Princess Lyriana. The young princess pressed her face against the glass with obvious curiosity. Instead of behaving like royalty, she looked more interested in watching the crowds. Daniel couldn't help smiling. Then the princess suddenly pointed directly at him. Queen Elyra glanced in his direction. Daniel immediately looked away. "Wonderful," he muttered. "The future ruler of the empire just caught me staring." The convoy continued onward. A few moments later, everything returned to normal, or at least it seemed normal. As Daniel resumed walking, a faint vibration traveled through the deck beneath his boots. It lasted less than a second. Most people didn't even notice. Daniel did. His smile disappeared. Years of experience told him something was wrong. He activated his scanner. The screen flickered. For an instant, strange energy fluctuations appeared deep within the station's lower infrastructure. Then they vanished. Daniel frowned. "That's odd. A maintenance worker passed nearby? Something wrong, officer?" Daniel stared at the scanner. No idea. Far beyond the celebration, hidden deep inside the enormous station, something unseen had just awakened. And somewhere within the endless machinery of Celestia Prime, a carefully prepared disaster had begun moving toward its first stage. Daniel spent the next hour trying to convince himself that the strange energy reading had been nothing more than a sensor glitch. Unfortunately, experience had taught him that dangerous situations almost always began with someone saying, "It's probably nothing." The station's central monitoring center occupied 3 levels of a massive tower overlooking the inner ring of Celestia Prime. Hundreds of holographic displays floated above workstations, while technicians monitored traffic, power consumption, atmospheric systems, and thousands of other functions required to keep a structure the size of a city alive. Daniel stood before one of the engineering consoles. Run the scan again. The technician beside him sighed. You've asked 5 times. And every time the answer gets stranger? The technician reluctantly activated the station map. A 3-dimensional model of Celestia Prime appeared between them. Most systems glowed green. One small region near the lower reactor ring briefly flashed yellow, then returned to green. The technician pointed. There. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Why did it change? No idea. That's not a comforting answer. It's an honest answer. Daniel hated honest answers when they involved unknown problems. His communicator suddenly chirped. Officer Cross, report to Festival Security Corridor 4. He pressed the device. On my way. The technician smirked. Maybe go arrest another vending machine. Daniel pointed at him. Don't joke. They're organizing. As he left the monitoring center, he noticed several engineers quietly discussing something among themselves. Their expressions bothered him. Professional engineers were usually calm. These looked nervous, very nervous. Outside, the Unity Festival remained in full swing. Alien musicians performed beneath floating holographic stars. Children from dozens of worlds chased tiny robotic animals through the promenade. Princess Lyriana was apparently doing the same thing. Daniel spotted her near a decorative fountain surrounded by attendants. The young princess was attempting to catch a small floating maintenance drone. The drone clearly wanted no part of the interaction. Come back! The machine accelerated. The princess accelerated after it. Several guards accelerated after the princess. Daniel watched the entire chase pass through the crowd. One exhausted guard muttered as he ran past. She escapes more often than criminals. Daniel laughed. Good luck. The guard looked ready to cry. Moments later, a deep vibration rolled through the station. Stronger this time. Conversations stopped. Music briefly cut out. Several holographic displays flickered. Then everything returned to normal. People exchanged confused looks. A few seconds later, the station announcement system activated. Attention guests. Temporary power fluctuation detected. No action is required. Daniel immediately disliked that announcement. Whenever officials specifically said no action was required, action was usually required. His communicator activated again. This time, Commander Voss sounded unusually serious. Cross, report to engineering control immediately. Daniel began moving. What happened? Just get here. The channel closed. That definitely wasn't good. By the time Daniel arrived, the atmosphere inside engineering control had transformed completely. Technicians rushed between stations. Emergency diagnostics filled the air. Large sections of the station map were flashing yellow. A senior engineer pointed toward the display. Power losses are spreading. Daniel stepped closer. From where? The lower reactor ring. The exact location of the anomaly. His stomach tightened. Cause? We don't know. Another engineer suddenly looked up. I've lost communication with Maintenance Hub 22. A second voice followed. Hub 19 offline. Then another. And 27. The room became silent. Entire sectors weren't supposed to vanish simultaneously. Commander Voss appeared beside Daniel. For once, the commander looked genuinely worried. You're thinking what I'm thinking? Daniel nodded slowly. This isn't random. Before either man could continue, alarms exploded throughout the room. Every display turned red. A stunned technician stared at the readings. No. What? Voss demanded. The technician's face had gone pale. Somebody disabled multiple safety systems. Daniel felt cold. Not malfunction, not accident, sabotage. Then the station shook. This time the vibration was violent. The floor lurched beneath their feet. Lights flickered. Far below the station, somewhere deep inside the reactor ring, a brilliant flash erupted across the monitoring displays. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then a voice screamed from across the control room. Explosion detected! A second voice followed. Hull breaches spreading. A third. We're losing containment. The celebration aboard Celestia Prime ended in an instant. And somewhere inside the enormous station, a disaster had just begun. Red warning lights flooded the command center. Across hundreds of displays, sections of Celestia Prime changed from yellow to red, one after another. Entire corridors vanished from the station map as emergency bulkheads slammed shut. Somewhere far below, automatic containment systems fought desperately to prevent the spreading disaster from reaching critical infrastructure. Daniel stood frozen for only a second. Then training took over. Status, a technician rapidly typed commands. Lower reactor ring suffered a cascade failure. Multiple explosions. Structural damage spreading through adjacent sectors. Another voice shouted from across the room. We're evacuating over 200,000 civilians. Commander Voss stepped toward the main display. Show me casualties. The screen filled with numbers. Nobody liked what they saw. Before anyone could speak further, another alarm activated. A young communications officer suddenly turned pale. Wait! Every head turned toward her. What is it? Voss demanded. She stared at her console. The princess. The room became silent. The princess what? Asked Daniel. The officer swallowed. Princess Lyriana's tracking signal is still active. A few seconds passed. Then realization struck everyone simultaneously. Active. Not moving. Not evacuating. Active inside the damaged sectors. The officer zoomed the map inward. A blue marker appeared. Deep within Sector 42. Directly inside the quarantine zone. Daniel felt his stomach drop. Tell me that's outdated data. Nobody answered. The silence was answer enough. At almost the same moment, another set of doors opened. Queen Elyra entered. The atmosphere changed instantly. She moved quickly, but carried herself with remarkable control, despite the chaos surrounding her. Her silver hair framed her human-like face while her long, elegant ears remained perfectly still. Only her eyes betrayed her worry. An advisor rushed forward. Your Majesty, where is my daughter? Nobody wasted time with formalities. The station map appeared before her. The Queen stared at the blue signal. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she asked a simple question. Can we reach her? An engineer answered. No. Daniel immediately disliked the response. The Queen's gaze shifted toward him. Then back to the engineer. Explain. The reactor breach released dangerous radiation throughout Sector 42. Emergency protocols automatically sealed the area. Then open it. We cannot. The engineer looked as though he wished to be anywhere else in the galaxy. The regulations prohibit entry. The Queen blinked once. I am the Queen. Yes. Open it. No. Several people quietly moved away from the engineer as if expecting an explosion. The Queen stared at him. The engineer stared at the floor. Daniel briefly wondered if this was the bravest man in the Empire or the stupidest, possibly both. Another technician interrupted. We've established communications. Everyone turned. A small, holographic image appeared. Princess Lyriana. The transmission flickered heavily. Behind her, damaged corridors sparked with electricity. Mother? The Queen immediately stepped forward. Lyriana. Relief crossed the young princess's face. I'm okay. A violent tremor shook the corridor around her. The image distorted. Mostly okay. Daniel almost laughed despite the situation. Almost. The princess glanced around nervously. The walls keep making strange noises. An engineer quietly muttered, That's not encouraging. The princess heard him. It's even less encouraging from this side. Several exhausted technicians accidentally chuckled. Even Queen Elyra smiled for a brief second. Then reality returned. A structural warning flashed across the display. Call 1:47:33, 1 hour, 47 minutes. The room fell silent. Daniel stared at the countdown. 1 hour before the entire sector failed. 1 hour before the princess died. The Queen turned toward the rescue coordinators. Prepare a team. The coordinator hesitated. My Queen, regulations forbid. Daniel finally lost patience. Do the regulations plan to rescue her themselves? Several heads turned. Nobody answered, because everyone knew the answer. The coordinator cleared his throat. No authorized rescue operation exists. Daniel laughed once. A short, humorless laugh. Outstanding. He looked at the countdown, then at the map, then at the princess. Something inside him settled, the kind of calm that arrived when a decision had already been made. Commander Voss noticed immediately. Oh no. Daniel looked at him. What? I know that face. I don't have a face. You absolutely do. The commander pointed at him. That's the face you make right before doing something incredibly stupid. Daniel glanced toward the sealed quarantine zone on the map, then toward the nearest emergency hangar access. The countdown continued ticking downward. 1 hour, 46 minutes. And somewhere deep inside Celestia Prime, a young princess was waiting for someone to come save her, whether the regulations approved or not. The countdown continued to fall. 1 hour and 42 minutes. Inside the command center, dozens of officers argued over evacuation routes, containment measures, and emergency procedures. Daniel listened for less than 30 seconds before deciding he had already heard enough bureaucracy for one lifetime. Quietly, he turned and walked toward the exit. Commander Voss immediately noticed. Cross. Daniel kept walking. Cross. Still walking. Daniel. He stopped. The commander folded his arms. What are you about to do? Daniel considered several possible answers. Unfortunately, all of them sounded illegal. I'm going for a walk. Toward Hangar 12? Coincidence? The emergency shuttle bay? Another coincidence. The shuttle currently being prepared for reactor zone entry? Daniel sighed. You're making coincidence sound suspicious. Voss rubbed his forehead. Around them, alarms continued flashing. The commander lowered his voice. If you enter Sector 42, you'll violate more regulations than anyone in station history. Daniel nodded. I know. You'll lose your career. Probably. You could die. Daniel glanced toward the giant countdown visible on the main display. So could she. Neither man spoke for several seconds. Finally, Voss exhaled. You're impossible. I've heard that before. Frequently. Daniel smiled. That part is true. Minutes later, he entered Hangar 12. Emergency crews rushed around a compact rescue shuttle equipped for hazardous environments. The vessel's hull was covered in radiation shielding plates and emergency thrusters. An engineer nearly dropped his data pad when he saw Daniel approaching. Oh no, Daniel pointed. Why does everybody keep saying that? Because whenever you show up, paperwork starts screaming. The engineer reluctantly opened the shuttle access hatch. Daniel climbed aboard. The cockpit lights activated. Outside, station authorities were already transmitting warnings. Officer Cross, stand down. Another voice followed. You are not authorized. Then another. You are violating emergency protocol. Daniel activated the engines. I appreciate the feedback. The shuttle lifted from the deck. Warning sirens erupted throughout the bay. A large red message appeared across his console. Unauthorized departure detected. That's technically accurate, Daniel admitted. The hangar doors opened. Beyond them stretched the immense interior framework of Celestia Prime. Normally the station felt immortal. Now it looked wounded. Sparks erupted from damaged superstructures. Entire sections were dark. Emergency force fields sealed ruptured compartments. The shuttle accelerated. As he approached the quarantine zone, communication static filled the cockpit. Then a familiar voice emerged. Hello? Daniel immediately recognized it. Princess Lyriana. Good, you're alive. There was a pause. Who is this? Daniel Cross. Another pause. The security officer who looked embarrassed when I pointed at him earlier? Daniel blinked. That is unfortunately correct. The princess laughed. Even through the static, her amusement was obvious. I knew I remembered you. Daniel smiled despite everything. Try not to make a habit of remembering people during disasters. A violent tremor shook the sector. Metal groaned somewhere in the distance. The princess became serious again. The station is getting worse. I know. Are you coming? Daniel guided the shuttle toward the sealed zone. Yes. Several warning systems immediately activated. Radiation levels critical. Structural failure imminent. Entry forbidden. Daniel glanced at the messages. Very negative computers today. The princess laughed again. Then another voice interrupted. An automated station intelligence. Officer Cross, entry is prohibited under Imperial Safety Regulation 14,002. Daniel rolled his eyes. Of course there's a regulation number. There are 12 additional regulations being violated. 12? The computer paused. Correction, 14. Impressive. The shuttle crossed the quarantine boundary. Immediately, the surrounding environment changed. The damage was far worse than official reports suggested. Twisted corridors floated in zero gravity. Broken transport rails hung suspended above glowing reactor trenches. Entire sections of the station drifted slowly through artificial vacuum pockets contained only by weakening force fields. Daniel stared. This wasn't merely an accident. It looked like a battlefield. Then his scanner detected something unusual, a hidden data transmission originating from inside the damaged sector. Not from the Princess, not from rescue systems, something else, someone else. The encrypted signal vanished almost instantly. But Daniel had already seen enough. His expression darkened. The explosion had not simply damaged the station. Someone inside Celestia Prime was still active, still transmitting, still hiding, and somewhere ahead, beyond collapsing corridors and spreading radiation, Princess Lyriana was waiting. While somewhere else in the shadows, the people responsible for the disaster were watching. The rescue shuttle moved deeper into Sector 42, weaving through a maze of twisted metal and drifting debris. Outside the cockpit windows, enormous support beams floated freely in distorted gravity fields. Blue electrical arcs danced between shattered conduits, illuminating the darkness in brief flashes. Daniel carefully guided the shuttle through a narrow opening between two damaged structures. The onboard computer immediately objected. Collision probability, 42%. That's optimistic. Correction, 51%. Much less encouraging. Behind the static, Princess Lyriana laughed. Do all human pilots argue with computers? Only the smart ones. The princess seemed pleased by that answer. Several minutes later, Daniel finally located the source of her signal, a damaged research complex built into the station's lower framework. The structure had partially collapsed. Massive support columns blocked most entrances. Emergency lighting flickered weakly through shattered windows. Daniel landed the shuttle on a surviving maintenance platform. The moment he stepped outside, his suit alarms began complaining. Radiation, structural instability, atmospheric contamination. The suit apparently hated everything. One crisis at a time, Daniel muttered. He activated magnetic boots and entered the facility. The interior looked worse than expected. Corridors had twisted into impossible angles. Sections of floor floated several meters above their original positions due to gravity distortions. A broken cleaning robot drifted slowly through the hallway. As Daniel passed, the robot suddenly activated. Welcome to Research Complex 9. A pause. Please do not explode. Daniel stopped. What? The robot's damaged speaker crackled. Message accuracy 93%. Then it powered down. Daniel stared at it. Even the robots are worried. He continued forward. The princess's signal grew stronger. Then a transmission reached his communicator. Officer Cross? I'm here. Relief flooded Lyriana's voice. You actually came. Against the advice of approximately everyone. I knew you would. Daniel smiled despite the danger. A loud crash echoed somewhere ahead. Metal groaned. The station was slowly dying around them. Where are you exactly? The princess transmitted her location. Daniel checked the map. 3 corridors away. Close. Very close. Then his scanner beeped. He stopped immediately. The encrypted signal had returned. Stronger this time. Someone was transmitting from inside the same facility, not far away. Daniel frowned. The signal originated from a sealed laboratory. He approached cautiously. The security door had been forced open. Inside, several data terminals remained active despite the station-wide failures. Someone had been here recently, very recently. Daniel accessed the nearest console. Thousands of files appeared. Most were corrupted. A few remained intact. He opened one. His expression hardened. The reactor explosion, the power failures, the quarantine systems. None of it had been accidental. Every stage had been planned, carefully, deliberately. Then he noticed another detail, a classified targeting file. The designated casualty, Princess Lyriana. For a moment, Daniel simply stared. The disaster had not merely endangered the princess. It had been designed around her presence. Someone wanted her dead. A warning flashed across the terminal. Unauthorized access detected. Then another. Multiple hostile contacts approaching. Daniel immediately stepped away from the console. Too late. Footsteps echoed through the corridor. Several figures appeared. Black armored suits, military-grade weapons. Faces concealed behind helmets. Definitely not maintenance staff. One of them raised a rifle. Daniel dove behind a workstation as energy bolts tore through the room. Glass exploded. Metal melted. The firefight had begun. Well, Daniel muttered from cover, that answers several questions. More shots slammed into the walls. The attackers advanced, professional, disciplined, prepared. They clearly had no intention of leaving witnesses alive. Daniel returned fire while retreating toward the exit. The corridor beyond shook violently as another structural failure rocked the facility. The attackers briefly lost balance. Daniel used the opportunity to escape. He sprinted through the damaged hallway. His communicator activated. "Officer Cross?" The princess sounded alarmed. "Was that gunfire?" "Possibly." "What does possibly mean?" "It means yes," the princess groaned. "My tutors always said adventures were exciting." They lied. Daniel rounded a corner. The princess's location marker now blinked only a short distance ahead. Finally, after everything, he was almost there. Unfortunately, the armed conspirators were coming too, and somewhere behind them, the dying station continued its relentless collapse. The corridor ahead ended in a collapsed security checkpoint. Beyond it, Princess Lyriana's signal pulsed brightly on Daniel's scanner. Only 30 meters away. Behind him, the conspirators continued their pursuit. Energy bolts flashed through the darkness, striking walls and scattering molten fragments across the corridor. Daniel slid behind an overturned equipment container. His breathing remained steady. His pulse did not. "Princess, I'm here. Any chance you're secretly a highly trained commando?" The princess laughed nervously. "No. That would have been helpful." Another explosion echoed through the facility. A support beam crashed somewhere nearby. The station's condition was deteriorating faster now. Daniel checked the countdown displayed on his wrist screen. 32 minutes until total sector collapse. Not enough time. Not even close. He peeked around the corner. The attackers were advancing carefully. There were 6 of them. Professional, patient, dangerous. Unfortunately for them, the station itself had become even more dangerous. A violent tremor suddenly shook the corridor. One of the armored operatives lost his footing. Another slammed into a wall. Daniel immediately fired. The shot struck a nearby control panel. Sparks erupted. A heavy emergency bulkhead dropped from the ceiling. 3 conspirators barely avoided being crushed. Daniel grinned. "Thank you, station." The station responded by shaking violently again. "Maybe not that much." He sprinted toward the princess's location. The checkpoint door ahead had partially collapsed. Daniel forced himself through the narrow opening. On the other side stood Princess Lyriana, alive, safe, at least relatively safe. The young alien princess looked remarkably calm considering the circumstances. Her silver hair was slightly disheveled. Her long, elegant ears twitched with relief. The moment she saw Daniel, she smiled. "You actually made it," Daniel nodded. "You sound surprised." "A little." "Fair." For a second, both simply stared. After all the chaos, it felt strangely unreal. Then another explosion shook the facility. Reality returned immediately. "We should leave." "Agreed." The princess picked up a small emergency backpack. "By the way, there are armed people trying to kill us." Daniel blinked. "You know about them?" "I overheard them arguing." "What were they arguing about?" The princess smiled. "One of them got lost." Daniel laughed despite everything. "Professional criminals." They seemed embarrassed. Another warning alarm echoed through the complex. This one sounded different, more urgent. The facility's artificial intelligence activated. "Structural collapse imminent." A pause. "Have a pleasant evacuation." Daniel stared upward. "Who programmed these announcements?" "I don't know," said the princess, "but they're terrible." Together they began moving through the damaged corridors. The route toward the shuttle remained open, for now. As they crossed a maintenance junction, Daniel noticed something large resting against the wall. An industrial cargo robot, nearly 3 meters tall, powered down, or so he thought. The princess accidentally brushed against its activation sensor. The robot immediately awakened. Its optical sensors flashed bright blue. Cargo collection mode engaged. The machine looked directly at Daniel, then at the princess, then back at Daniel. "Collecting cargo." The giant robot grabbed a nearby storage crate, then another, then somehow decided the fleeing conspirators qualified as cargo. The robot charged down the corridor. The armored operatives stared in confusion. One pointed his weapon. The robot ignored him completely. "Cargo identified." "What cargo?" shouted the operative. The robot grabbed him. The remaining conspirators scattered. The enormous machine pursued them relentlessly. Daniel watched the chaos unfold. "I think we've accidentally weaponized logistics." The princess laughed so hard, she nearly stumbled. For the first time since entering the sector, the tension briefly lifted. Then Daniel's scanner beeped. A transmission from the command center. Commander Voss appeared. His expression suggested several future disciplinary hearings. Then he noticed the princess. The commander froze. "She's alive." "Hello," said Lyriana. Voss looked genuinely shocked. "You actually found her?" Daniel nodded. "Working on the surviving part now." The commander's face became serious. "We received the evidence you transmitted." Daniel remembered the files, the conspiracy, the assassination plot, the sabotage records. Voss continued. "The information is already spreading through secure channels." "How bad is it?" The commander's expression darkened. "Worse than we imagined." Behind him, senators, investigators, and security officials rushed through the command center. Arrests were already beginning. The conspiracy was unraveling. But first, they had to survive, because the station's dying sector had entered its final stage, and the path to the shuttle was starting to collapse around them. The corridor seemed to break apart behind them with every step. Daniel and Princess Lyriana ran through the dying heart of Sector 42, while alarms screamed from every direction. The station's artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. One moment they were sprinting across the floor. The next they were pulling themselves forward through brief pockets of weightlessness. The rescue shuttle was less than a kilometer away. Unfortunately, the station appeared determined to make that kilometer memorable. A section of ceiling collapsed ahead of them. Daniel grabbed Lyriana's arm and pulled her backward just before several tons of metal crashed into the corridor. The princess stared at the wreckage. Do stations usually try to kill people this aggressively? Only the expensive ones. Despite the danger, she laughed. They found an alternate route through a maintenance shaft. As they climbed downward, Daniel received another transmission from Commander Voss. "Cross, I'm busy. I can see that." The commander's image flickered through heavy interference. "Security teams have arrested 17 officials." Daniel paused. 17. The conspiracy went deeper than anyone imagined. Behind Voss, investigators moved rapidly through the command center. Entire departments were being dismantled. Corrupt senators, executives, and security administrators were being taken into custody. The evidence Daniel had transmitted from the research facility had exposed everything. The disaster, the sabotage, the assassination attempt. Years of hidden corruption were collapsing almost as quickly as Sector 42. Queen Elyra herself appeared beside Voss. Her silver hair was slightly disordered for the first time since Daniel had met her, but her long ears stood proudly upright. "Officer Cross," Daniel nodded respectfully. "My queen." The queen's eyes moved toward her daughter. For a moment, relief softened her normally composed expression. Then she looked back at Daniel. "Bring her home." Daniel smiled. "That's the plan." The transmission ended. Minutes later, they finally reached the shuttle platform, or what remained of it. Half the structure had collapsed into darkness. The rescue shuttle stood alone at the edge of the damaged deck. "Please tell me it still works," said Lyriana. Daniel looked at the vessel. A support beam had fallen across one wing. Several external panels were damaged. Smoke drifted from one engine. "Define works," the princess groaned. Together they climbed aboard. The engines activated, then immediately shut down. Daniel closed his eyes. "No." The console flashed. "Engine failure." The princess leaned forward. "Can you fix it?" "I can try." "What if you can't?" Daniel pointed toward the viewport. "Then we're having a very unpleasant day." Working quickly, he bypassed damaged circuits and rerouted power through emergency systems. Years ago, he would have waited for permission, waited for specialists, waited for procedures. Now he simply solved the problem. Not because rules were useless, but because people mattered more. The engines suddenly roared to life. Both of them cheered. The shuttle launched seconds before the platform collapsed entirely. Behind them, Sector 42 finally began its last catastrophic failure. Explosions raced through the reactor ring. Massive structures folded inward. Fire and energy illuminated the darkness. Then the shuttle burst free into safer sectors. Across the Empire, billions watched the live broadcast. The princess was alive. The rescue had succeeded. Weeks later, reconstruction efforts transformed Celestia Prime. Trials continued for those responsible for the conspiracy. Many powerful figures fell. Many innocent lives were protected because the truth had finally surfaced. At the Imperial Grand Assembly, representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered beneath a vast crystal dome. Daniel stood awkwardly on the ceremonial platform. He hated ceremonies. He hated formal uniforms even more. Queen Elyra approached. The hall became silent. The queen faced the crowd. Many obey rules, her voice echoed through the chamber. Few possess the courage to act when those rules fail. She turned toward Daniel. If Officer Daniel Cross had obeyed protocol, my daughter would not be standing here today. Thunderous applause filled the dome. Lyriana stepped forward. I also saved something. Daniel blinked. What? The princess grinned mischievously. A recording appeared above the audience. Daniel's voice echoed through the chamber. Please don't explode. It was his conversation with the damaged robot. Laughter erupted everywhere. Daniel covered his face. The queen herself laughed. Even Voss looked entertained. For the first time in weeks, Daniel laughed too. Not because he had become a hero. Not because millions admired him, but because he finally understood something important. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was choosing to act anyway. As the celebration continued beneath the stars, Daniel looked through the crystal dome toward the endless galaxy beyond. The future remained uncertain. New worlds waited. New adventures waited. But whatever came next, he knew one thing for certain. If another life needed saving, he would break every protocol all over again.